Section 6 of 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe. Sir, I had the pleasure, several weeks ago, of sending you my 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe. I hope you received them. A second edition is now called for, and I should esteem it a favor if you would write me a few words concerning them, that I may print with this forthcoming edition as an appendix to them. If you think any of the 100 Proofs are unsound, I will print all you may have to say about them, if not over 400 words, as above stated. I made Richard A. Proctor, Esquire, a similar offer, giving him, of course, a little more space. I feel sure that the very great importance of this matter will prompt you to give it your immediate attention. I have the honor to be, Sir, yours sincerely, William Carpenter. Copies of the first edition of this pamphlet have been sent to the leading newspapers of this country and of England, and to very many of the most renowned scientific men of the two countries, from the Astronomer Royal of England to Dr. Gilman of Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore. Several copies have been sent to graduates of different universities, on application, in consequence of the subjoined advertisement, which has appeared in several newspapers. Wanted, a scholar of ripe attainments to review Carpenter's 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe. Liberal remuneration offered. Apply to William Carpenter, 71 Chew Street, Baltimore. N.B. No one need apply who has not courage enough to append his name to the review for publication. We should be pleased to hear from some of the gentlemen in time for the insertion of their courageous attacks in the third edition. Opinions of the Press. This can only be described as an extraordinary book. His arguments are certainly plausible and ingenious, and even the reader who does not agree with him will find a singular interest and fascination in analyzing the 100 Proofs. The proofs are set forth in brief, forcible, compact, very clear paragraphs, the meaning of which can be comprehended at a glance. Daily News, September 24. Throughout the entire work there are discernible traces of a strong and reliant mind, and such reliance as can only have been acquired by unbiased observation, laborious investigation, and final conviction. And the masterly handling of so profound a theme displays evidence of grave and active researches. There is no groping wildly about in the vagueness of theoretical speculations, no empty hypotheses inflated with base assertions and false illustrations, but the practical and perspicuous conclusions of a mind emancipated from the prevailing influences of fashionable credence and popular prejudice, and subordinate only to those principles emanating from reason and common sense. H.D.T. Woodbury News, September 26, 1885. We do not profess to be able to overthrow any of his proofs, and we must admit, and our readers will be inclined to do the same, that it is certainly a strange thing that Mr. William Carpenter, or any one else, should be able to bring together 100 proofs of anything in the world if that thing is not right, while we keep on asking for one proof, that is really a satisfactory one, on the other side. If these 100 proofs are nonsense, we cannot prove them to be so, and some of our scientific men had better try their hands, and we think they will try their heads pretty badly into the bargain. The Woodbury News, Baltimore, September 19, 1885. This is a remarkable pamphlet. The author has the courage of his convictions, and presents them with no little ingenuity, however musty they may appear to 19th century readers. He takes for his text a statement of Professor Proctor's that "the earth on which we live and move seems to be flat," and proceeds with great alacrity to marshal his 100 arguments in proof that it not only seems, but is flat, "an extended plain stretched out in all directions away from the central north." He enumerates all the reasons offered by scientists for a belief in the rotundity of the earth, and evidently to his own complete satisfaction refutes them. He argues that the heavenly bodies were made solely to light this world, that the belief in an infinity of worlds is a monstrous dogma, contrary to Bible teaching, and the great stronghold of the infidel; and that the Church of Rome was right when it threw the whole weight of its influence against Galileo and Copernicus when they taught the revolution of the earth on its axis. Michigan Christian Herald, October 15, 1885. So many proofs. Every Saturday, September 26, 1885. A highly instructive and very entertaining work. The book is well worth reading. Protector, Baltimore, October 3, 1885. The book will be sought after and read with peculiar interest. Baltimore Labor Free Press, October 17, 1885. Some of them, the proofs, are of sufficient force to demand an answer from the advocates of the popular theory. Baltimore Episcopal Methodist, October 28, 1885. Showing considerable smartness both in conception and argument. Western Christian Advocate, Cincinnati, Ohio, October 21, 1885. Forcible and striking in the extreme. Brooklyn Market Journal. Baltimore, Maryland, USA, December 7, 1885. Appendix to Third Edition. Copy of letter from Richard A. Proctor, Esquire. 5 Montague Street, Russell Square, London, W.C., 12 December, 1885. W. Carpenter, Esquire, Baltimore. Dear Sir, I am obliged to you for the copy of your 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe, and for the evident kindness of your intention in dedicating the work to me. The only further remark it occurs to me to offer is that I call myself rather a student of astronomy than an astronomer. Yours faithfully, Richard A. Proctor. P.S. Perhaps the pamphlet might more precisely be called 100 Difficulties for Young Students of Astronomy. Appendix to Fourth Edition. Copy of letter from Spencer F. Baird, Esquire. Smithsonian Institution, Washington, D.C., January 6, 1886. Dear Sir, a copy of your 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe was duly received, and was deposited in Library of Congress, October 8, 1884. 1885. A pressure of much more important work has prevented any attempt at reviewing these 100 Proofs, which, however, have doubtless been thoroughly investigated by the inquisitive astronomers and geodeticists of the last 4 centuries. Yours very respectfully, Spencer F. Baird, Secretary, S.I. Mr. William Carpenter, 71 Chew Street, Baltimore, Maryland. Copy of a letter from one of the several applicants for the 100 Proofs for the purpose of reviewing them. The writer is Professor of Mathematics at a high school, Auburn, New York, and, in his application for the pamphlet, says, "I am a Yale graduate and a Yale Law School man. Took the John A. Porter Prize, Literary, $250, at Yale College." Auburn, December 10th, 1885. My dear Sir, your treatise was received. I have looked it over, and noted it somewhat. A review of it to do it justice would be a somewhat long and laborious task. Before I undertook so much thought, I would write and ask, what and how much do you expect? How elaborately you wished it discussed? And what remuneration might be expected? It sets forth many new and strange doctrines which would have to be thoroughly discussed and mastered before reviewed. I am hard at work at present, but would like to tackle this, if it would be for my interest as well as yours. Hope you will let me know very soon. Very respectfully, to Mr. W. Carpenter, Baltimore, Maryland, Frank Strong. Note: Unless a man be willing to sell his soul for his supposed worldly interest, he will not dare to tackle the 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe. No man with well-balanced faculties will thus condemn himself. We charge the mathematicians of the world that, if they cannot say what they think of this pamphlet in a dozen words, they are entitled to no other name than cowards. Baltimore, Maryland, May 22, 1886. Appendix to the Fifth Edition. Editorial from the New York World of August 2, 1886. The Earth is Flat. The iconoclastic tendencies of the age have received new impetus from Mr. William Carpenter, who comes forward with 100 proofs that the earth is not a globe. It will be a sad shock to many conservatives who have since their childhood fondly held to the conviction that the earth is round like an orange, a little flattened at the poles. To find that, after all, we have been living all these years on a prosaic and unromantic plane is far from satisfactory. We have rather gloried in the belief that the semi-barbarous nations on the other side of the earth did not carry their heads in the same direction in which ours point. It is hard to accept the assertion that the cannibals on savage islands are walking about on the same level with the civilized nations of our little world. But Mr. Carpenter has 100 proofs that such is the unsatisfactory truth. Not only that, but the iconoclast claims that we are not whirling through space at a terrible rate, but are absolutely stationary. Some probability is given to this proposition by the present hot weather. The earth seems to be becalmed. If it were moving at the rate of 19 miles a second, wouldn't there be a breeze? This question is thrown out as perhaps offering the 101st proof that the earth is not a globe. Mr. Carpenter may obtain the proof in detail at the office at our usual rates. A revolution will, of course, take place in the school geographies as soon as Mr. Carpenter's theories have been closely studied. No longer will the little boy answer the question as to the shape of the earth by the answer which has come ringing down the ages. "It's round like a ball, sir." No, he'll have to use the unpoetic formula, "It's flat like a pancake, sir." But, perhaps, after we have become used to the new idea, it will not be unpleasant. The ancients flourished in the belief that the earth was a great plain. Why shouldn't we be equally fortunate? It may be romantic, but it is not especially comforting to think that the earth is rushing through space, twisting and curving like a gigantic ball delivered from the hand of an enormous pitcher. Something in the universe might make a base hit if we kept on, and we would be knocked over an aerial fence and never found. Perhaps, after all, it is safer to live on Mr. Carpenter's stationary plane. The Record of Philadelphia, June 5, 1886, has the following in the literary notes. Under the title 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe, Mr. William Carpenter of Baltimore publishes a pamphlet which is interesting on account of the originality of the views advanced, and, from his standpoint, the very logical manner in which he seeks to establish their truth. Mr. Carpenter is a disciple of what is called the Zetetic school of philosophy, and was referee for Mr. John Hampden when that gentleman, in 1870, made a wager with Mr. Alfred R. Wallace of England that the surface of standing water is always level, and therefore that the earth is flat. Since then he has combated his views with much earnestness, both in writing and on the platform, and, whatever opinions we may have on the subject, a perusal of his little book will prove interesting and afford room for careful study. The motto which he puts on the cover, "Upright, downright, straightforward," is well chosen, for it is an upright lie, a downright invention, and a straightforward butt of a bull at a locomotive. The Florida Times-Union, December 13, 1885. Editor Charles H. Jones. Pray, Mr. Jones, tell us what you mean by an upright lie. We have received a pamphlet from a gentleman who thinks to prove that the earth is flat, but who succeeds only in showing that he is himself one. New York Herald, December 19, 1885. The reviewer in this case is no doubt a very sharp man, but his honesty, if he have any at all, is jagged and worn out. The quotations which he gives are fraudulent. there having been nothing like them in the pamphlet. The author of the pamphlet is no flat, although he may perhaps be called a crank. St. Catherine's, Canada, Evening Journal, December 23. To say that the contents of the book are erudite and entertaining does not do Mr. Carpenter's astronomical ability half credit. The Sunday Truth, Buffalo, December 27, 1885. The entire work is very ingeniously got up. The matter of perspective is treated in a very clever manner, and the coming of the hull down vessels on the horizon is illustrated by several well worded examples. Buffalo Times, December 28, 1885. The erudite author, who travels armed with plans and specifications to fire at the skeptical at a moment's notice, feels that he is doing a good work, and that his 100 anti-globular conclusions must certainly knock the general belief in territorial rotundity out of time. We trust that the distinguished author, who has failed to coax Richard Proctor into a public discussion, may find as many citizens willing to invest 2 shillings in his peculiar literature as he deserves. Buffalo Courier, December 27, 1885, and January 1, 1886. It is a pleasure now to see a man of Mr. Carpenter's attainments fall into line and take up the cudgels against the theories of the scientists who have taught this pernicious doctrine, the sphericity of the earth. Rochester Morning Herald, January 13, 1886. As the game stands now, there is 1 horse for Professor Carpenter. Buffalo World, January 16, 1886. It is interesting to show how much can be said in favor of the flat world theory. It is fairly well written, although, we believe, filled with misstatements of facts. Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, January 17, 1886. We believe the editor cannot point one out. It is certainly worth twice the price, and will be read by all with peculiar interest. Scranton Truth, March 8, 1886. Mr. William Carpenter has come to Washington with 100 proofs that the earth is not a globe. He has a pamphlet on the subject which is ingenious, to say the least, and he is ominously eager to discuss the matter with any one who still clings to the absurd prejudices of the astronomers. The Hatchet, May 9, 1886. It contains some curious problems for solution, and the author boldly asserts that until they are solved the globular theory of the earth remains unproven and is fallacious, etc. The Presbyterian, Philadelphia, June 19, 1886. His reasoning is, to say the least, plausible, and the book interesting. The Item, Philadelphia, June 10, 1886. Mr. Carpenter seems to have made a thorough investigation of the subject, and his arguments are practical and to the point. Sunday Mercury, Philadelphia, June 13, 1886. A gentleman has just called at the editorial rooms with a pamphlet which is designed to demonstrate that the earth is not a globe, but a flat disk. He has also laid before us a chart from which it plainly appeared that the earth is a circular expanse of land, with the North Pole in the exact center and the Antarctic Sea flowing all around the land. We went on to state that we lodged the care of all astronomical questions in the hands of Rev. R. M. Luther, to whom these perplexing matters are but as child's play. Our readers may, therefore, expect at an early date a judicial review of the astronomical and cosmological situation. National Baptist, Philadelphia, July 8, 1886. Editor, Dr. Wayland. We hope that the Rev. R. M. Luther will give us the means of publishing his decision before any more editions of the 100 Proofs be issued. We are afraid that he finds the business much more than child's play. 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe, by William Carpenter, is published by the author, whose novel and rather startling position is certainly fortified by a number of argumentative points, which, if they do not shake the reader's preconceived notions on the subject, will, at least, be found entertaining for the style in which they are put. Evening Star, Philadelphia, July 22, 1886. His proofs go a long way towards convincing many that his ideas on the subject are practical and sensible. Fashion Journal, Philadelphia, July, 1886. Editor, Mrs. F. E. Benedict. 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe is a curious little pamphlet that we can commend to all interested in astronomy and related sciences. It may not upset received notions on the subject, but will give cause for much serious reflection. Published by the author, William Carpenter, Baltimore, Maryland, price 25 cents. The Saturday Evening Post, Philadelphia, July 31, 1886. Here now is an able thinker of Baltimore, Professor William Carpenter, who presents the claims of the Zetetic philosophy to be considered the leading issue of our times. One of the great proofs of the truth of the philosophy is that the regular astronomers do not dare to gainsay it. They are well aware there is no South Pole. Professor Carpenter, in a treatise that has reached us, furnishes 100 proofs that the earth is flat, and while we cannot say that we understand all of them, we appreciate the earnestness of his appeals to the moral people of the community to rise up and overthrow the miserable system of error that is being forced upon our children in the public schools, vitiating the very foundations of knowledge. What issue can be more noble or inspiring than truth versus error? Here is an issue on which there can be no trifling or compromise. In the great contest between those who hold the earth is flat and they who contend that it is round, let the flats assert themselves. Milwaukee Sentinel, August, 1886, from a long article, The Great Zetetic Issue. End of section 6. Section 7 of 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe by William Carpenter. End matter, Part 2. Letters to Professor Gilman of the Johns Hopkins University. 71 Chew Street, Baltimore, September 10, 1886. Professor Gilman, Johns Hopkins University. Sir, in the 21st ultimo I wrote to ask you if you received the pamphlet which I left for you at the University 12 months ago, entitled 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe, and, if so, that you would kindly give me your opinion concerning it. I write, now, to ask if you received my letter. I am quite sure that you will consider that the importance of the subject fully warrants the endeavor on my part to gain the views which may be entertained by you respecting it. The 5th edition will soon be called for, and anything you may urge, for or against, I shall be happy to insert in the appendix. I send herewith a copy of the 4th edition of the pamphlet. Yours sincerely, William Carpenter. 71 Chew Street, Baltimore, October 7, 1886. Professor Gilman. Dear Sir, I am now preparing the appendix for the 5th edition of my 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe, and I should be glad to receive your opinion of this work to insert in the said appendix. I can offer you from a few lines to a page, or 2 if necessary. Of course, if this work as a whole be a fraud, it must be fraudulent in all its parts, and each one of the 100 proofs must contain a fallacy of some kind or other, and the thing would justify your disapprobation, expressed in few words or many. If, on the other hand, the work is what it professes to be, it will certainly claim your approval. Yours sincerely, W. Carpenter. 71 Chew Street, Baltimore, October 14, 1886. Professor Gilman: Dear Sir, a week ago I wrote you a letter to tell you that I should be glad to receive your opinion of the 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe, of which work 5,000 copies are now in circulation. I wrote this work, 26 pages, in 1 week, without neglecting my daily business. Surely you can reply to it in a week from this time. I will give you from 1 to 4 pages if you wish that amount of space, and send you 50 copies if you desire to have them, without putting you to the slightest expense. I will even take any suggestion you please to make as to the title which shall be given to this extra edition of my work containing your reply or opinions. I should be sorry to be under the necessity of printing this letter, with others, in my next edition, in the place of any such reply or expression of opinion; for I feel sure there is no one in Baltimore who is more capable of giving an opinion on this great subject. Trusting to hear from you in a few days, I am, dear Sir, yours truly, William Carpenter. 71 Chew Street, Baltimore, October 22nd, 1886. Professor Gilman, Sir: This is the 5th letter, and the last, to you, asking you for an expression of your opinion concerning the 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe. Which would you prefer, to see my words or yours in print? I give you a week in which to decide. Truly, William Carpenter. The Johns Hopkins University of Baltimore. We are indebted to Scribner's Monthly for the following remarks concerning this institution. "By the will of Johns Hopkins, a merchant of Baltimore, the sum of $7,000,000 was devoted to the endowment of a university and a hospital, $3,500,000 being devoted to each. This is the largest single endowment ever made to an institution of learning in this country. To the bequest no burdensome conditions were attached. The physiological laboratory of the Johns Hopkins has no peer in this country, and the other laboratories few equals and no superiors." In the first annual report of the University, 1876, we read: "Early in the month of February, 1874, the trustees of the University having been apprised by the executors of Johns Hopkins of the endowment provided by his will, took proper steps for organization and entering upon the practical duties of the trust, and addressed themselves to the selection of a president of the University. With this view the trustees sought the counsel and advice of the heads of several of the leading seats of learning in the country, and upon unanimous recommendation and endorsement from these sources, the choice fell upon Mr. Daniel C. Gilman, who at the time occupied the position of president of the University of California. Mr. Gilman is a graduate of Yale College, and for several years before his call to California was a professor in that institution, taking an active part in the organization and development of the Sheffield Scientific School of Yale College, at New Haven. Upon receiving an invitation to Baltimore, he resigned the office which he had held in California since 1872, and entered upon the service of the Johns Hopkins University, May 1, 1875." Galloway Cheston. "In the hunt for truth, we are not first hunters and then men, we are first and always men, then hunters." D. C. Gilman, October, 1883. The 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a Globe have been running around within the observation of the master huntsman and his men for a year or more. Now let the hunters prove themselves to be men, and the men hunters. It is impossible to be successful hunters for truth, if error be allowed to go scot-free. Nay, it is utterly impossible for the Johns Hopkins University to answer the purpose of its founder if its hunters for truth do not first hunt error with their hounds, and hold it up to ridicule, and then and always keep a watchful eye for the truth, lest they should injure it by their hot haste, or wound it with their weapons. Professor Daniel C. Gilman, we charge you that the duties of your office render it imperative that, sooner or later, you lead your men into the field against the 100 proofs, to show the world that they are hunters worthy of the name. If, in your superior judgment, you decide that there is error to be slain, or show that your hunters are worthy of the better name of men by inducing them to follow and sustain you out of the beaten track, in your endeavors to uphold God's truth, if, in your superior judgment, you tell them, there is a truth to be upheld. End of the Appendix to the 5th edition, November 9, 1886. Professor Proctor's Proofs. A proof! A proof! cries Student Brown. Says Proctor, very well, if that is all you want indeed, I've plenty I can tell. But really I have scarcely time or patience now to do it. You ought to know the earth's a globe, then as a globe you'd view it. I knew it long ago, in truth 'twas taught me in my cot, and then too old was I to doubt, too young to say 'twas not.